But one of the areas that I want to highlight, which is central to Baba Mutulu's legacy, is him. So you've spoken about him as an activist, organizer, as a militant, so to speak, yeah, in terms of getting military training, self-defense, you know, political education. But then there's the healer, yeah, which becomes critical at a particular point in time, especially when we mentioned COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program. One of the major elements of it, as we know, is that the FBI floods the Black community, particularly targeting the organizations with drugs, yeah. And so in that context, yeah, in the attack on the movement by the US empire, in the destruction and the imprisonment of many of the leaders of the movement, in the flooding of the community with drugs, and those drugs beginning to affect the children of the movement, Baba Mutulu becomes a healer. Yeah, and so just speak to that development of his organizational legacy.
Well, the piece with the healer, like I said, when you have the takeover of the Lincoln Hospital in Bronx, New York, by the Young Lords Party, and other community-based organizations, and then once they take over the hospital, they tell the Black Panthers to come. They specifically ask Mutulu, "You good at what? Political education? We need you here." And so, as you mentioned, heroin is flooded into Black and brown communities, not only as a vehicle to deal with the movement, but to specifically, it's a form of capitalism, right? That somebody is profiting from this and leads to more genocide of our communities. So there's something they in terms of dealing with the health of our communities, wanted to figure out how to deal with it.
Yes, sir.
And of course, with heroin, if you want to come off, there, some physiological things happening to somebody. So they had to figure out how to deal with that. Yes, Mutulu was in a car accident while working there, and two of his sons were in the car. And Yuri Kochiyama, who I mentioned earlier, talked to him about the efficacy of using acupuncture for them to recover from the car accident. So once he figured out that efficacy, he decided, how can we apply this acupuncture to the healing of people who are coming off a heroin addiction? And they found out it was a very effective measure. Now, Mutulu believed this, though, as well, is even though they could help people detoxify, and deal with the physical elements, they still needed the political education. So it had to be combined. So they created the method, not only the methods, and they utilized methods and there's a documentary called Dope is Death that deals with this, but they figured out the technical things with acupuncture to help someone heal, but as well, they incorporated the political education to help them challenge it. That became a threat because, the U.S. government and the colonial medical system was utilizing methadone, which would have kept people chemically dependent, and also it had harm could come to people through a long-term addiction to methadone at that particular time. So it was a challenge between the people, Mutulu's folks promoting people's medicine versus the people promoting chemical dependency, just being heroin being replaced by methadone. And so part of the challenge was that, and it was a hostile challenge. There were actually, people at Lincoln Hospital, part of the detoxification program, who were harmed, who were killed. There was one of the doctors, Richard Taft, who was murdered in this whole struggle at that particular time around this. And ultimately, the city of New York took over the program because they said the terrorists were running the program. And the alternative was that Mutulu and another doctor, Richard Delaney, who received their certification in Chinese medicine, formed a clinic in Harlem. Okay. The Black, and they formed an association, the Black Acupuncture Advisory Association of North America, set up their clinic in Harlem, and not only began to heal more people, but they trained more doctors. Okay. And they train even people who had MDs already to utilize acupuncture. So he certainly was a continuation of that tradition. Even when he was in prison, I didn't talk about it much before, where he would heal brothers in prison. So he took that stuff, that knowledge there with him, even in captivity, and began to share it. And and there's still people he trained who perform, and not just African people. I saw when he talked to our children in Colombo, I saw a Asian guy sitting behind him, Tatsu Hirano. He was trained by Mutulu, in acupuncture. There were some white folks who were trained by Mutulu in acupuncture. So he taught far and wide.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know why it's very important to highlight this? Just focusing on our people in the United States of America for a second, but this applies all over. All right. There's a lot of talk about we need to take responsibility for the ills, that are present in our community, and there are some ills present in our community. But when you look at our movements, there is not a movement of note among African people that did not do that work. That did not do that work in terms of healing us from drug addictions and violence in the communities and so on and so forth. And another institution that comes to mind is Bobby E. Wright in the 1980s, looking at psychiatry, right? You know what I'm saying? Francis Cress Wilson, right? You know what I'm saying? These are all people that were developing institutions to be able to address the needs, the mental and physical health needs of African people, right? Which is oftentimes left out of the story when people are talking about y'all need to take responsibility. Why were they attacking breakfast programs in clinics? Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, why was they? And then once they've attacked them and destroyed them, they act like they didn't exist. And because we're not controlling the narrative, so many of our people don't know that these institutions existed. And it's such a powerful thing. And I'm made to understand that Baba Mutulu is also pioneering in certain procedures or schools of acupuncture. I don't know if you can speak at all.
Exactly. And I'm not as adept on that, but yes, there's a protocol of acupuncture that he and other people who are associated with the Lincoln detox experience that's utilized today.
Right.
But they established it. Again, I think he was able, even though he was trained by other people, he had enough confidence in himself to begin to take it to another level. And they were able to, through trial and error, to be able to develop their own form. There's an article I could send you on that.
Beautiful.
Done with Mutulu in coordination with Uriwana Trinidad, who was one of the doctors who was trained through that experience.
Right. Are you able to speak to, because obviously we're going into the 1980s now, and this is what is euphemistically called the crack era. Are you able to speak to the functionality of the clinic and the work of Baba Mutulu Shakur and those who he was working with in terms of remedying our community in that era?
Well, keep in mind, the clinic came under attack by the government. And so when Mutulu actually was forced underground in 1982, and so much of the work of the clinic was disrupted by that point. So when we talk about the 80s as the crack era, the clinic as an institution had been was forced underground, if you will.
Understood.
And yeah, so it wasn't there. If he did any work around that impacted the crack era, he was finally captured in 86.
Yeah.
And so he might have did it behind bars, but I have no knowledge of that.
No, that's fine. All right, so let's speak on what we can speak on in terms of that. Right. So he gets in. He goes underground, as you said, 1982. Yeah,
he goes underground in 1982. Of course, the incident that started the whole thing was what we called in the movement the Brinks expropriation. I should say the incident that starts everything in terms of an intense surveillance of Baba Mutulu and others was when Assata Shakur was, as we say, liberated in 1979.
Yes.